Welcome to History According to Bob. Today we're going to take a walking tour of Troy. This is going to be kind of our inaugural show on walking one of these sites. Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sherry.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Here is a map showing the ancient world, time of Troy in the late Bronze Age. You can see where Troy is. Of course, you see the Black Sea. And we're going to be coming down from Istanbul to Troy. Later on in other shows, we will be taking you to Mycenae and some of the other places, as well as Athens. Now, here's the route that we took. Now, this is a long trip. Well, we're in a van with a group of other people. And I might add, we had a very nice group of people. Most of them were college professors or level A teachers with a lot of classical background. It's about 3 hours, 3.5 hours each way. About halfway, we stopped to go to the bathroom and pick up some snacks and have a little breakfast. And that's where Sherry and I fell in love with goat's milk ice cream. Once we reached the Dardanelles Straits, this is where the Helmspont, what the Helmspont would look like. Unfortunately, it was kind of hazy when we went across, so we didn't get a good shot as this one. Here is our ferry that we went across. We're crossing at the narrowest point in the Dardanelles Straits, which was, of course, used by Xerxes when he crossed with his army and by Alexander the Great later on. This shows the view from the ferry. We're about halfway across, so that's the town that we started at. And then this is the view of what we're heading to. This is the big city of Kankakee. And at Kankakee, we ended up stopping at the port where we had lunch. This is the Trojan horse that they used for the movie Troy. So a lot of people come by to visit. You can't go in it or do anything, but you get around it and take some pictures. They do have one at Troy, but it's a little different. Now here's a little different way of looking at the problem that we're going to have once we get to the archaeological site. This is a sample of the various layer cakes of cities, one on top of the other, with the one in the red, Troy 6, being the most likely to be what we're talking about when it comes to the Trojan War. Now here is a picture of the computer-generated sequences of towns, major cities, and one on top of the other. And we'll be walking all through that. And it's very confused here, but after you're on the site for a little while, it does seem to make sense. This is an aerial view of the site as we would have seen it. And I will use this throughout the presentation here and show you where we are so you can get an idea of what section we're at, what we're looking at. Once you get on the site and got your tickets, then you see the Trojan horse that they have there. This one you can climb up into it and have your picture taken. But it was 98 degrees when we were there. It was really hot, and I'm sure that was an oven. This is the sign that leads to the excavation house, which is where Schliemann ran his headquarters out of. They also sell tickets from that as well. And here's the actual building that was used by Schliemann as his headquarters. We then gathered underneath a tree for our guide to talk to us. We had a very good guide. He was a nice gentleman. He knew a lot about the structure. He was really good at the different types of sources. He did not believe that there was ever a war here, but 7 times during his presentation, he said, well, now this is actually in the Iliad, and this is actually in the Iliad. So for the most part, we listened to him, but then the rest of us kind of gave our own little information. We're waiting here because there's a group of 40 German tourists ahead of us, and he needs the signs at each of the spots to do his presentation. As you head towards the excavation, you'll see this sign, Ilios or Wilusa. Wilusa would be the Hittite designation for the site, and Ilios is one of the later names for the city in the Hellenistic period, or then later on Ilium. This is an artist's rendition of what Troy would have looked like as of Troy 6, the most likely one to have been involved in the Trojan War. And what we're really going to be walking around is the citadel. You can walk out into the plains, but even though we are here for 4 hours, it's not enough time to go out in the other regions. And there's really not much to see as of this point. They're still excavating down into the ground. But there is an underground spring and a variety of other things to see. If you'll notice in this picture, there is a sign, and it's marked 6. What that tells you is where you are located is Troy 6. As you go up and down through the site, you will have these markers. The steps that you see to the right, that will take you up to the level that would be Troy 9 or Troy 10, which would be the Hellenistic city level and the Roman city level. And I'm going to take my first picture from there, overshooting what's off to our left. So here is where I am standing to take these first pictures, and then this is where we're going to be walking initially. So here's the view from up on Troy 10, Troy 9 or Troy 10. So you're looking across, you see the big wall. This would have been the main outside wall. And then here you have the wall leading towards one of the entry gates. And look at the size of this great tower. And this is just the base of it. It would have had to have been knocked down to build the other cities on top of it. That it is hollow on the inside is really not that unusual. As you jut these things out, if they happen to be taken, you have a wall back behind them. This is what the fortification would have looked like in ancient times. The upper part above the stone would have been mud brick that was then stuccoed over, which is very typical of what the Hittites did at their capital city of Hattusa. And this site, Troy 6, would be contemporary with that. Here's a shot of the fortification tower and the wall, and then you see you're going into a narrow spot that will be the entry gate. Now down on ground level, looking back to where I was standing, you can see the different type of stone and how it is more vertical rather than inclined back. And you can see it changes in construction practices as you go through the site. That hole in the middle they have is a drainage. They have drainage throughout this. The ancients were well aware that heavy rain is stone's worst enemy. So there are all sorts of these drains, catch basins, and whatever. Here we are walking towards what would have been one of the main gates. And you notice this sloping wall structure, which is very typical of Troy 6. That will give it away for the most part, no matter where you are on the site. And here I am, that's about 20 pounds ago, up against the site to show you that I have actually been there. In my handout pointing to the wall, typical history according to Bob, gesturing. Now we're heading into the corner. I wanted to give you a little better shot of the slope, which of course helps deflecting anything that is thrown. It would also help people throwing stuff down to hit the people as well. Again, here is the artist's representation of that area. It's not the outside wall, it's the interim section. And we're going to be going around and then heading up. And you see that you have would have had a wall out on the other section to provide more defense if you needed it. And there's our tower again. Once around the curve, you can look back and you can see, look at the newer stonework because it's flat. And then you get up at the top where you see much more monumental stones because there's a slab that runs across the top in Troy 9, Troy 10, which is for the base for the Temple of Athena. Here we are moving up. We're heading up the hill. So we've left behind technically Troy 6. These are later cities that we're walking up and over at this particular point. And one of the ladies there you see with the two walking canes, she was in her 70s. She's been to the Himalayas and all sorts of other places. We're almost up to the top, and we're looking off into the opening area, so you can look back down and see some of the buildings. These would have been homes, and here, this is the Citadel, so you would have had aristocrats up here. We'll eventually walk down into the center of this, where we'll see Troy 2. Here we are. We've reached the peak of the site from coming down, but we're not on Troy 6 level. We're on the Roman section where you would have had the Temple of Athena. So I'll show you here's where we are at this particular point. Here is the view looking out from this position. As you can see, they have these wonderful walkways that are well marked that allow you to see as much of the site as they can. Well, they could actually still work here and keep you from getting lost. And you could get, if they didn't have this stuff marked, you could get lost pretty quickly. Here's our view out towards what would have been the Aegean Sea area or the peninsula where the Greeks would have had their camp. Here's an artist view of what that would have looked like. We're standing approximately right here looking this direction. And this is what you would have seen if you were on the other side looking back towards the city. This happens to be this is what it looks like today. There's no bay there anymore. It's all been silted up. And looking the other direction, this is the view where you can see the Aegean Sea and the Hellespont. So now we're going to head down into the site, heading deeper and deeper and deeper into it to go and visit Troy 2. See the marker. They also changed the color for each of the levels. We are now heading down into the area where Troy 1 and Troy 2 are. And this is the location on the aerial map. As you begin to descend, you start seeing, as in this picture, a little bit of rock across the top, and then the lower layers, which are not quite as organized, which is an indication of Troy 1 and with Troy 2 up above. Further down, as we go down the path, we go into an area that's been recreated to give you an idea of what the constructions look like. Now, these would have been buildings that would have been put on top of stone, and they're made with mud-dried brick. And these would have been up above the foundation of stone. So this one, which looks like stone, is not. It is just drier. The one section that's gray is this drier mud-dried brick. And then you see how it's put together. It would have stuccoed over the outside of it. Now, Troy 3, 4, and 5 would have had a lot of construction like this, which is why so little of those cities actually survive. So that you get this idea that when we get to the area where Troy 2's citadel is, that it will have a wall with that enclosure at the top that is this material that's stuccoed over. Then when you come out of the grove of trees that's in the center of Troy, then you'll see the sign that says to Troy 1. Now, Troy 1 is actually Troy 1 and Troy 0. There's actually a site further underneath that goes back to 3200 BC, but we're heading to Troy 1. And most of it is uncovered as a result of a trenching by Schliemann. On the aerial map, here's where you find the Troy 1 site, which is in the trench. And so you have the view of the trench looking up the hill, and then you have the view the other direction showing it going out to the bay area. If you go further down to the point where you're ready to descend down the hill at Hisselark, this is a view that you would have where the bay would have been. Here is an example of what you find all over the archaeological site at Troy. They have these very nice maps and charts in multiple languages, and obviously you see this one is marked Troy 2. Here's the recreation of Troy 2, which has a little citadel with a ramp. Now you can see in the next picture, you see off to the left is where the Troy 1 houses were, and then you see the ditch that would have been around this entrance to the citadel, and you see the sloped stone for protection. Here you have a view of the wall around the citadel of Troy 2. The important object here is the olive tree right in the middle of the picture, because that is the spot where one day when Schliemann and his wife Sophie were walking, saw a glint of gold, and that is where he discovered the so-called Trojan Treasure. Here are 3 examples of the treasure. One is this magnificent necklace, then we have the beautiful bracelet, and then we have one of the earrings. There are multiple sets of earrings that were found. Here's a picture of Schliemann with a picture of Sophie wearing some of the jewelry in a sepia tone version. Now I'm going to do a whole show on the treasure and what happened to it. Trojan Treasure. It is certainly not from Troy 6. It is actually below Troy 2, so it's somewhere between Troy 1 and Troy 2, so it's much older. And if you've seen any gold from the Bronze Age, you can tell that it is older than what you would find in Egypt, what you would find in Mycenae, and several other places. The one thing about the picture of Sophie, after the treasure disappeared from Germany at the end of World War II, that was just about all that was left of the treasure, except for some of the copies that the Charlottenburg had made for displays until the treasure was rediscovered in the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. Let's get back to the city of Troy 2, because it has this magnificent ramp. So here you see it from one side. Now they won't let you walk up it. Obviously we would have loved to have walked up it, but they will not. They won't let you do that. Here's a shot I took from further away as we're moving towards the Greek section of Troy. And then this is a close-up of the ramp going up, and then there's the obligatory History According to Bob pointing picture. Here's an artist's rendition of what it would have looked like. And notice that you have Troy 2, you have the ramp going up to the citadel, you see the stone, and then you see this different work. That would have been the mud-dried brick with the stucco over the exterior of it. Now, once you leave this particular part, then we're heading up into the site. And as you see, the sign here says heading towards Troy 6. And we're coming into another one of the gate sections. Here we have the chart. You notice that it has a number 9. It's a number 9 chart. They have an audio tour. Practically everywhere has an audio tour nowadays. It would be punch number 12 to get the lesson. And then they have the artist's rendition. So here where we are looking at part of Troy 6. There's the corner. There's another section which this is actually a tower corner that you see. Then there's the base, which would have had buildings built on top of it. And then here's the artist view of what that particular building would have looked like. And you see you would have gone up into Troy 6 from there. You can see a little bit of the wall to the far right of the picture. So this is within the citadel, actually, not the exterior wall covering the whole city. And here's the artist's view of the Hellenistic city that was built after Alexander's time period, and that is located on the aerial map in this particular area. This is a view looking down towards it because the city part and part of the temples was actually below what was the citadel of Troy 6. And then once you get closer, you can see some of the foundations of the buildings. There are parts of the ceilings that are left. And then you can looking at the other direction, you can see the Greek wall, which is typically different. And then you see the fortification, the wall of Troy 6 behind it. This is in the sloping area down below the citadel because they had a temple up at the top. And then here's an aerial view of the excavation as well. So you can get an idea where the citadel wall is located and where the square is and houses and what have you. And then here is the full artist view of what Troy 6 looked like with its city and its town and its exterior wall and its fortifications. This shows the excavations that have been done more recently, which have expanded out, showing that the city went much further away, that it's not just this little tiny place, that's the whole city. And there's a variety of areas where you have wells. And this is the path that leads down to one of the hot springs areas. You can go down and visit it. They don't really want you to go in, but you can at least go and take some exterior pictures. Their guide said it would take about 20 minutes down and 20 minutes back, and of course it was hot that day. But here's a chart showing where the water is and how you get to it through the tunnel. Fortunately, there are people who have been in the tunnel, and I found some pictures online. So here we have the tunnel coming down to where the water is located. So there is water on the site. Obviously, you can't drink the bay. It's salt water, but they had fresh water available. And then you have a picture of Troy that is the Roman city, 85 BC to 500 CE. So this would be Ilium. You see, again, they've got the temples up on the top, which would be sitting over Troy 6's main central citadel. One building that stands out is the half moon shape, the Odeon. But this is the Roman city, which we're in the process of expanding at the end. I mean, Constantine originally thought about making this the eastern capital of the Roman Empire, but then decided it was not really as defensible as using Byzantium. And so here is an aerial view, and you can see on our aerial view, it's pretty obvious where the Odeon is located. And it's one of the easiest things to remember is that the back of the wall, that's the beginning of Troy 6's fortifications for the main citadel and another gate. Now, Odeons, usually during the day, are places where the citizens will have municipal meetings. Later on, it is used as a singing venue, as a theater venue, but it's relatively small. It's not like the gigantic Odeon that's in the Agora at Athens. Here's a view from it from the ground level, and then here is a view from the top tier. And then there's the view of what is now the stage. Now, the Greeks would not have had the stage there. The Romans like to have a stage. They also like to use props as well. When I take you on a tour of Ephesus, you'll see that their Odeon is a little bit bigger. It's much taller, but same multi-purpose use. Now we're just about ready to exit the site. As you can tell, this is where we're going to be looking. This is the view that you'll see next, and this is looking into the heart, right up into Troy 6 towards the top of the citadel. And in the picture that you see, this would have been the gate. You see the main street going up that actually goes through the mud-dried brick and then on up to the top. And then ultimately, if you were to go back in time, we'll use our artist friend again, and he provides us with what the picture would have looked like. You would have had a tower there. So actually the Odeon has taken part of the tower down. And there you have it. Now, of course, some of the books on Troy, which are always very important, we're always very familiar with the Iliad. Many people believe that's the whole war. Does not end with the horse. That's in the Odyssey. So there's Homer's 2 works. But there are 2 others. There's a lot that went on between the 2, and that is covered by a gentleman named Quintus of Smyrna. And he wrote a book in the AD period that tells that story, the Amazon queen and the Amazon warriors coming to the side of Troy and both sides getting allies coming in. And then technically the final book is the Aeneid, which Augustus had Virgil write so that it would end the Trojan War with the victory of Aeneas' family. Remember, when the city is destroyed, the gods who supported the Trojans were very upset with Zeus because he let the Greeks, who were less religious, win. And Zeus, he said, all right, pick a family out that's really special, and we'll make sure that they survive and that their descendants will get revenge. And so this is the story of Aeneas and his wife and his family and their travels. And the Romans believed that he's responsible for Rome becoming a major military power, and that the Romans are the Trojans' revenge on the Greeks. So if you're going to read the books and make it work for you, you want to read the Iliad, then you want to read the War at Troy, then you want to read the Odyssey, and then finish with the Aeneid. The sources for this, as you can see, one of the sources is a revived edition of Troy by Askin. Another source from the Osprey Men-at-Arms series is Troy 1700 to 1250 BC by Fields. The Guide to Troia and Walusa by Korfman is really good. This is a book that you'll find on the site and was recommended by the guide that we had on the tour. And then one of the most interesting books, and this has been quite a while ago that this was made, the In Search of Troy, In Search of the Trojan War by Wood. Does really, really, really good work, and he did a BBC series on that book. So there's some interesting material from that. So if you go to historyaccordingtobob.com, I do podcasts 6 days a week that are free. You can pick them up there. You can subscribe there. And if you like what we're doing here, feel free to go by the website and donate and sign up or pick up a CD. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.